You.
Forget that there's a camera turning.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Human Responsibilities Tribunal. I'm Limina, and glad to see you here today. Today, we're doing our second in the series of the Lonesome Dove LIMIN-tations. It is a series where we explore different ideas, characteristics, and skills through the concepts presented in the Lonesome Dove series. And today, luckily, I'm joined by my husband, Chris, who actually introduced me to these books. So with that, I'll just let Chris introduce himself and then maybe talk about how he got into the books and then got me into the books.
Okay. Well, I remember first encountering Lonesome Dove back in the late 80s. Saw the miniseries on TV. I think probably in like 88 or 89 it came out first. I'd never read the books. I think the books first came out in 86. But anyway, I watched the show, loved it, recorded it on VHS, of course, watched it over a bunch more times. And I think that was probably the last time I watched it. I think I watched it again back in maybe like around the 90s sometime. I hadn't watched it again in like a decade. And then just happened to see one of my favorite podcasts, The Art of Manliness.
Which is one of mine too, which is interesting because...
Which is interesting, yeah. This guy, shout out to Brett McKay. I love the podcast. I've gotten so much useful info out of it. But he happened to just have an episode entitled "Why I Love Lonesome Dove" and why he reads the book once a year, he said. And,
wow.
And then he happened to have he was interviewing another author who had just written, I think it was I don't know if it was a biography on McMurtry, the Lonesome Dove author, or if it was an actual dialogue on Lonesome Dove. But
oh geez, and I can't remember his name, but I'll put it in the show notes, and I'll put this link to the actual episode into this.
Yeah, it was good. And I was shocked to see that anybody else had even known about Lonesome Dove, really, or was that much in love with it as I was. But it sparked the interest in going back to read some of the books, which then we got into the audiobook. And yeah, that just from that podcast and getting into the audiobooks has really sparked a whole love of the Lonesome Dove. And now we've gone through the other 3 books in the series, which has been amazing. And I think we've both listened to all of them multiple times now, and have extracted so much more out of this series of books than I think either one of us would have imagined. I think we were just talking today about how I've been kind of sitting on this for the knowledge of this book for like the last almost 20 years. I'd never read the books till recently. And now we're just enamored with this whole series again. And I've gotten a whole lot of life lessons out of this book and so many great conversations out of this as well. So
yeah, and that's really interesting. So I never have seen the Lonesome Dove series on TV and just won't go back and watch it. I really trust and like how my imagination sees things, which I'm sure is different than yours. So, and I'm not much a TV watcher, so I'm really happy to just leave it with the audiobooks and then the written books. And I do think it's brought a lot in terms of just the way he explores the complex ideas of the self and then the community and then the change within people and just different concepts has been interesting. It's also interesting what you said there about, I watched this 20 years ago and only now I'm sort of incorporating these ideas, and it just makes me wonder about the idea of you can plant lots of seeds and that's important, but when people are ready, they'll explore them themselves, right?
Yeah, well, I guess good thing I came across Art of Manliness.
Yeah.
That sparked that whole thing going again.
I think there's a lot for women in that show too. I think there's a lot for everyone in that show. I think he does a really good job.
I didn't even realize there was 3 other books and that this thing was a series. So yeah, what do you say? I kind of like how they put it in the podcast, where Larry McMurtry, the author, he even talked about how he grew up. He's from Texas originally. grew up like, you know, the Western genre as a genre in Texas was the king of all media. Everybody, like everything was John Wayne Westerns, and there was this, everybody was a hero and all that. And McMurtry, what he wanted to do was take that sort of genre and I guess almost shine the light of truth on what some of these heroic characters, what they would have looked like in real life, what their thoughts would have been, what drove them to do what they did, and explore the dark sides and the faults of a lot of what these heroic sort of Western style characters would look like. And I think the guy did a bang up job, even though he actually admitted in an interview once, he said he felt that when Lonesome Dove first came out, that it was really misunderstood by the audience. Everybody kind of thought it was like a real sort of Gone with the Wind sweeping Western epic, and that was not what he intended. It's definitely an epic, but it really explores the dark sides of a lot of these kind of Western characters.
Well, and I guess sort of I think it's because of that, it's a good reflection on life. At the end of The Art of Manliness, he says he likes to gift the book, and the one friend of his said, no happy endings. And I don't think it's about that. I think it's that what might rub people the wrong way is the absence of karma. Good things happen to bad people, and bad things happen to good people. And such is life, right? Life teeters along and ticks along, sort of without that idea of that balance or what have you. And that also that you can find some good and bad, in that some characteristics of people can tilt towards one side or the other, and it's different even throughout the course of their life, not just people aren't static, right? That's one thing I think McMurtry has done a wonderful job of in these books, is showing that people aren't static. So somebody that's incapable can become capable, and in that capability can become authoritarian at the end, which is sort of leading into the scene and quote we're going to have from the book today. And Chris will read it, but I'll set it up, which is they're on the way from Texas to Montana. And at this point, it's near the end of the book, so they've hit Montana, and Call is reflecting, and he's reflecting on where he is in the world and his community. And then also in this talks about the past discussions he's had with Augustus. So.
Yeah, which is an interesting take, because Call is such a stoic character, right?
Right.
And the contrast of his partner Gus, who's the what they call the Epicurean, like the the Don Quixote style character. Yeah, I will say one other thing too. It takes a hell of a storyteller to tell this good of a story that doesn't have any happy endings. Think of how difficult that's got to be, and to make it such an enduring story that's so well loved by so many millions of people and has been printed in so many different languages, and it really doesn't have a whole lot of happy endings. It's got to be difficult.
Well, and maybe that's a reflection on that it's not about happiness, and happiness has become marketing now, right, for self-help and a ton of psychology and stuff. And the truth is maybe that being content and capable should actually be the goal. And I'll leave it with that. I'll leave you with that.
Okay, so the quote that you were talking about. So this is after they're on their way to Montana.
They're in Montana.
They're in Montana. So Gus has been injured, and Captain Woodrow Call is about to go take a look for him. So with that, the thought of him, Woodrow Call, leaving sent a ripple of apprehension through the whole camp. Though independent to a man in some respects, the outfit was happier in all respects when Captain Call was around. Or if not the captain, then Gus. Only a few hours earlier, they had felt cocky enough to take on an army. After all, they were the conquerors of the Yellowstone. But now, watching the captain catch a horse for Gus to ride back on, they all felt daunted. The vast plain was beautiful, but it had reduced PEI to a scarred wreck. The Indians had Gus holed up somewhere. They might kill him, and the captain too. All men were mortal, and they felt particularly so. 1,000 Indians might come by nightfall. The Indians might fall on them as they had fallen on Custer. Call had no time to soothe the men with elaborate instructions. If Gus was badly wounded, he would weaken rapidly, and every hour counted. Arriving 10 minutes too late would be as bad as 10 days or a year, for that matter. Besides, the almost beseeching way the men looked at him was irritating. Sometimes they acted as if they'd forget how to breathe if he or Gus weren't there to show them. They were all resourceful men, he knew that, even if they didn't. And yet at certain times they had become like children, wanting to be led. All his adult life he had consented to lead, and yet occasionally, when the men had seemed particularly dumbstruck, he wondered why he had done it. He and Augustus had discussed the question of leadership many times. It ain't complicated, Augustus maintained. Most men doubt their own abilities, but you don't. It's no wonder why they want to keep you around. It keeps them from having to worry about their failure all the time. They ain't failures, most of them, Call pointed out. They can do perfectly well for themselves. Augustus chuckled. You work too hard, he said. It puts most men to shame. They figure out they can't keep up, and it's just a step or two from that to feeling that they can't do much of nothing unless you're around to get them started. It don't take on me, which is lucky, he added. I don't care how hard you work or where you go. I'd like to see something that could put you to shame, Call said. Well, my pecker's done it a few times, Augustus said. Call wondered what he meant by that, but he didn't ask. When he was packed, he mounted at once and rode over to Dish Boggett. You're in charge, he said. Trail on north and I'll be back when I can. Dish paled at the thought of so much responsibility. He had enough worries as it was. And what with PI talking of ghosts. The captain looked angry, which made the men better reconciled to the fact that he was leaving. All of them feared his angers. But once he left, before he and the mayor were even out of sight, their mood of relief changed back to one of apprehension. It's a kind of an interesting back and forth. It's like they need him around for direction. They want him around for direction. They all fear his anger. It seems like none of them really know how to live up to his work ethic or can work as hard as he can, but sometimes they want him gone, sometimes they don't. It's like it's a good typical example of the back and forth that streams through this book of balance, and that constant theme of balance between characters, between personalities, between work ethics, between capabilities
and life too, right? Because with leaders, whether they're real leaders or just Hollywood or whatever, is we love to hate them and we hate to love them, right? There's always that back and forth sway we feel between all of them. But it's interesting, like Dish Boggett in that is worried about Call leaving, but really all those men have taken the same journey with the same risks and done the same amount of work, except perhaps the leadership and organization. And Dish is actually the top hand. He's the one that not only has done that, has directed the herd and been the one, not called to like break a lot of stampedes. He's the one that's really stood that ground and is very, very capable.
Yeah, it seems Pete, the character of PI, kind of, he is extremely capable, only it's like he doesn't know it. And it doesn't come out of him unless the captain is around to, to bail him out, I suppose, if he feels like he gets in trouble. I don't know if that's accurate.
Well, and in the series, in the next book, PI does break free of the captain's leadership. And once he does and takes those reins, he really becomes not only the leader of his family, which I think is important, especially in this day and age, as dads are we're being told they're almost obsolete, but it's become apparent that they're super important. In breaking free from that, he's be able to become a leader for his family and take his role with his wife, but also become a real hero and really shown himself to be capable.
Yeah, the character of PI, I think, is actually something that's just kind of occurred to me now too. Like he's very capable. He's a good fighter, as like, you know, Captain called has admitted it quite a few times, but P himself comments in the book, he's like, well, I can't really shoot anything and hit it unless I really take my time and really aim carefully and really think about things. And he's reluctant to make a decision when the captain's around. It's kind of like he's kind of afraid of failure. He doesn't fear death. He fears failure when the captain is around. He doesn't want to disappoint the captain.
He's certainly, what I like is about Pi is he's very truthful about where he is and what he can and cannot do. Yes. And it almost has become self-limiting for him, because if he is purposeful and puts his mind to it, he's capable of very much, but he doesn't overstep what he thinks his skills are. He's not a guy that's going to be susceptible to the Peter principle, which means you get a promotion right up until you're ineffectual at your job. Yeah. He's never going to try for the